One of the most beautiful places I have ever been is a spot called Two-Step at Hononau Bay on the Big Island of Hawaii. The area is called Two-Step because the lava has formed two natural steps that allow for easy entry into the water. Standing on the flat, black lava flow, I place my mask and snorkel on my face, then I sit down on the top step and slip on my flippers. Once I lower myself to sit on the naturally formed shelf, it's a fairly easy maneuver to scoot down to the lower step and then swim off into the sea. The clear blue water at Two-Step is alive with dolphins, sea turtles, and abundant coral reef ready for exploration. As someone who's always been a bit timid about open water swimming, one aspect of this area I like is that the water is fairly deep, about 15 feet at the entry. Now I know that might not sound like a good thing to those who share my timidity with water, but the reason the depth is good is that it means that the coral reef is well below me on those first few vulnerable moments when I'm slipping into the water, allowing for a safe place to float, observing the sea life that resides in the coral. A living web of exoskeleton, sea coral is rigid and can be razor sharp, making it a painful thing to bump up against. So that swimmers and boats are able to avoid scrapes that destroy the hulls of boats, the skin of swimmers, as well as hurt the coral, reefs are often marked with sea mark buoys. These marking devices are hallmarks, placed there to say, watch out, sharp and painful things are below. So when I came across this line in one of my favorite books, it got me thinking. The wish to control floats like a buoy above a hidden reef of fear. The wish to control is the buoy. It's a warning sign saying, look out, there's something below that may be painful to touch. And the thing that's hidden is the deeper emotion, a potentially painful promontory of fear. This line comes from a story, In the Gray Zone, by Rachel Naomi Remen, a UCSF physician who writes eloquently, with authenticity and vulnerability, seeing her life's work as promoting the reintegration of heart and soul into the practice of contemporary medicine. Reading that line in the story, it really got me thinking about control and fear and their relationship to one another. In my work as a chaplain on the palliative care team at Kaiser Hospital in Redwood City, I meet patients and their loved ones at key moments in their lives. Often that takes the form of being with folks that as they learn about a new diagnosis, or when they're encountering shortcomings of treatments like chemotherapy that's causing more discomfort than is bearable. I see firsthand every day the limits of medicine and the limits of our bodies. It's meaningful work, and I'm deeply humbled by how often people let me into their lives in ways that are big and small. Being in treatment for a medical condition can be an emotionally fragile place, a place where the sharp and submerged emotions, grief, fear, despair, become uncovered and exposed. Not long ago, I read a beautifully written book by Kate Bowler, a professor at Duke Divinity School. Professor Bowler has made her life's work the study of the prosperity gospel. She puts it this way simply. Bowler says the prosperity gospel is the creed that sees fortune as a blessing from God and misfortune as a mark of God's disapproval. She visits and studies megachurches and prosperity gospel faith communities across America to build a broader understanding of these beliefs and practices. I understand Bowler's curiosity, as I had a fascination with the rise and fall of prosperity televangelist ministry of Jim and Tammy Faye Baker in the 80s. I was transfixed by their meteoric rise and millions of devoted followers, and by their downfall when they were found to be engaged in infidelity and gross financial abuses. Growing up in our expansive and covenantal and non-creedal Unitarian Universalist tradition made me curious about creedal systems of belief, other traditions that were more prescriptive. I was an outsider looking in, a 20-year-old working on a degree in religious studies, when Baker's ministry went into free fall. While I knew devout Christians whom I held in very high regard, my deeply reverent grandmothers are two people who come to mind. My grandmother's humble piety did not seem to have much in common with the kind of grandiosity I saw in the televangelist displays of riches. I was fascinated by what I understood to be the simple calculus of Baker's prosperity message. You give your faith to God, send donations to Baker's ministry, and then you would get wealth and health, gaining victory over life's painful and sharp places. Professor Kate Bowler acknowledges she came into this field of study because she found the prosperity gospel's message curious and appealing. It was a message that led her to believe she could curate her life, minimize losses, feel that she could stand on her own successes. She says, no matter how many times I rolled my eyes at the creed's outrageous certainties, I craved them just the same. She tells her story this way. Married in my 20s, a baby in my 30s, I won a job at my alma mater straight out of graduate school. I felt breathless with possibilities. It was certainty, plain and simple, that God had a worthy plan for my life and that every setback would also be a step forward. I wanted God to make me good and make me faithful with just a few shining accolades along the way. Anything would do if hardships were only detours on my life's long journey. I believed God would make it that way. But the title of Bowler's book gives away a hint to her lived reality. The title, Everything Happens for a Reason, or Other Lies I've Loved. Little did she know that when she began her studies, that there were to be big detours on her life's journey. The path paved with certainty doesn't unfold quite as she imagined. Overcome with pain in her gut, losing weight without intention to do so, Kate goes to visit a GI doctor who tells her they have no explanation for these things happening in her body. But Kate is resolute in her insistence that the doctor not dismiss her worries. Rolling his eyes as he does so, the doctor puts in an order for a CT scan. Then a few days later, she gets the call. We need you to come in and see the doctor. We think it's cancer. Kate soon learns that she has cancer of her colon, and it appears to be stage 4. Advanced to having spread beyond the confines of her colon, metastasized into other areas of her body. As she begins to share with others about her illness, trying to dwell within the experience with some amount of equilibrium, she finds that even her best friends, though well-intentioned, are having a hard time navigating those waters of uncertainty with her. Friends and even strangers ask all kinds of questions. When did the symptoms start? Is this hereditary? Friends of friends send over recipes for green drinks and quinoa salad, and others ship herbal supplements straight to her house. Just try this, friends seem to be saying. You can eat your way out of this. Even within the confines of her own mind, she is unable to shake off the longings for stories that somehow make it better. She reports, my own infertility experience should have taught me how to surrender, taught me how little I can control in the conditions of my own happiness. Instead, that happiness has only thickened my resolve to salvage what I can from the wreckage. She has an epiphany in the hospital that even her own mind can be a controlling false prophet when she finds herself having unrealistic expectations about her medical progress. When the doctor tells her she'll be out of the hospital in a few days, she thinks it'll be far sooner, saying to herself, I'm plucky. I will be the exception, the one who exceeds predictions. Bowler reflects that when she was a child, her father would read her stories from Greek mythology. The one she loved most of all was the prideful king Sisyphus, doomed to roll a boulder up an impossibly steep hill, only to have it roll down again and again. As she said, Sisyphus would discover for all eternity that not every burden can be shouldered. But then that voice inside her head would overshoot again, and she would find herself thinking, at least Sisyphus kept trying. As she begins to navigate the waters of illness, gradually finding her sea legs, there's a phrase she hears often and finds painful to hear. Everything happens for a reason. Bowler says this, the only thing worse than saying to me everything happens for a reason is pretending you know the reason. I've had hundreds of people tell me the reason for my cancer, because of my sin, because of my unfaithfulness, because God's fair, because God's unfair, because of my aversion to Brussels sprouts. No one is short of reasons. She announces her verdict on the phrase this way, when someone is drowning, the only thing worse than failing to throw them a life preserver is handing them a reason. By grasping for reasons, she feels that people seem to say to her, don't go deep. Sail right over those complex and painful feelings and stay up with us on the surface. Tell us that control can be within our grasp if we just name and claim your healing. They urge her to find the reason, address it, and quickly, if you please, move on to reclaiming her good health. Giving reasons to a person in the midst of a time of uncertainty is a way to try to control the unknown. It feels safer to tell ourselves our own stories of exceptionalism or entitlement that look above the surface. We say to ourselves, I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm healthier than that other person, so that hardship won't happen to me. We resist vulnerability and allow our egos to take over our inner narrative. This happens on a personal level, but it can be even more troubling when superficial reasoning gets played out on a larger scale. The current administration's storyline on the border wall is one example. The administration tells us a story that our nation needs to build a stronger, longer, higher border wall for the citizens of our country to be safe and solvent. Continuing to tell the fiction of America as a zero-sum game where someone must lose something for anyone else to gain allows for the administration to pretend that there is a simple, single reason for the unemployment and economic scarcity of our nation. As Kate Bowler puts it, control is the drug, and we're all hooked. Whether we believe in the prosperity gospel's assurance that we can muster the future with our own words and attitudes. It's one thing to think these thoughts to encourage ourselves to make good food choices or exercise more or do what we can to support a healthy planet. It's another thing when the controlling thoughts leave our mouth, when we telegraph judgment with our eyes, or if I act in a way that is oppressive or controlling to another person to make sense out of my own inner chaos and fear. Each one of us has our own special way of making sense of grief and fear and despair. There's no exact formula, no one-size-fits-all way to cope with uncertainty. But in our Time for All Ages today, Sammy chooses some good options that are worth exploring. When Sammy's visitors have given up efforts to take control of Sammy's experience of illness, Sammy's finally able to say to them what Sammy perceives to be helpful. To the visitors, the doctor, the minister, and the magician, Sammy says that there are 3 expressions of support that would be welcome: friendship, presence, and love. First, Sammy says, right now, the medicine I need most is your friendship. When we're in the depths of sharp coral adrift on the reef, we do well to listen to what our body and spirit are saying. This friendship starts with befriending ourselves. The ouch moment, when we feel fear and despair, can be our body's way of saying, pay attention. Rather than snub out the difficult emotion that knocks at the door, numbing it or turning it away, we can try our best to build what therapists call affect tolerance, attending and befriending even the most difficult of feelings. In tough times, friendships are benefited by candor and integrity. As Kate Bowler's story relates, when we try to give reasons for life's heartaches, seeking to banish our own fears, we instead become disempowering and inauthentic. Fellowship with an honest, open heart is a caring gift in an uncertain space. And sensitivity matters. We can consider the context of the present moment, doing our best to slow down, turn up the sensor on our emotion detector, pause to study the mood a bit longer than we might have in easier times. If today is the rotten, awful post-chemo day when everything hurts, it's a day to be quiet together. That is friendship as good medicine. Next, Sammy says, the prayer I need most for you is to simply be with me. By showing up for one another, we embody the message that says, we're not alone. We bring integrity to the relationship by honoring the commitments we make. When we slow down and stop trying to make sense of everything, sticking labels onto every experience, we begin to move into accompaniment. The word accompaniment comes from the Old French compagnon, literally one who breaks bread with another. It's based on the Latin com, together with, and panis, bread. It's about being together with equanimity, sharing a meal, a cup of tea, spending quality time. It's a power with model that breaks down oppressive and controlling forces. Synergies found together help all rise through the experience of companionship. Surrendering our attention to our companion is a way of humility and accountability. Sometimes presence comes in a form that allows for the cultivation of spaciousness. We do our best to be open to channeling the ebb and flow of the pace. Accompaniment means resting in quietude, smelling the roses, setting aside the cell phone, and holding a space for reflection. Our relationships give our lives context. Friends can help see the wider story. My trusted friend will know that I am not my worst day, I am not my diagnosis. I am not a disability or solely some misfortune. The presence of our loved ones, the ones who've known us in sunshine and sorrow, make the unbearable bearable. And finally, Sammy says to the visitors, the magic I need most is your love. To love someone is to appreciate them as a whole and real being in their true and full personhood. This kind of loving acceptance does not come instantly out of thin air, pulled like a rabbit out of a hat. It's a magic that's brewed up in a cauldron of presence and friendship. It's turned into love with the additional dashes of creativity, curiosity, and even humor. When we love someone, we look for pathways to create surprise and delight. We might phone a mutual friend for a video call or hold a seance together to call that long-lost uncle, decorate the room with flowers and balloons, share a fancy dessert for no reason. There's an alchemy in bringing our curiosity to that relationship. Curiosity is where learning and love meet. We can't ever fully know what another person's core experience is like. And as we've talked about, assuming that things about a person are going through a tough time can feel downright oppressive. Showing love might take the form of adopting a beginner's mind, cultivating silence, or asking open-ended questions that give life air and space. And lastly, being in a fearful place doesn't have to be a we can't ever laugh about this serious zone. It can be humor that catches us by surprise even on our darkest days. In my work as a palliative care chaplain, I am amazed again and again by how often laughter is part of our meetings with patients and their loved ones. When we share laughter, we find the comforting places in the mystery together. There is no answer key. There is no list of reasons that would satisfy every longing for certainty. We all wish for certainty and get disappointed by the uncertain nature of the world. When we wade into the deep waters of life, we will be guaranteed at some point that we will encounter the sharp edges of fear or grief or despair. Duke Divinity Professor Kate Bowler lives on, coping by finding richness of life in the middle places, not a perfect island, paradise, or not a ship dashed on the shoals. Bowler says her motto has become, don't skip to the end. She reminds us not to sail past the hard places, but to savor life's journey, learning, loving, and adapting through good times and hard times. Sooner or later, we will come to the edge of all that we can control and find life waiting there for us. May we be fortunate to find a bounty of friendship, presence, and love all along the way. Blessed be.